Every time Mariyam fell in love, the boy died. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't bad luck. It was a sentence. She was born with a shadow attached to her soul, an obsessive, violent entity that refused to share her with anyone. If she looked at another man, the entity looked at him too, and then it ended him. But this isn't just a story about a haunting. This is a story about a battle for a soul that spanned decades, crossing the line between the world of the living and the realm of the unseen. It is a story of a love so possessive, so violent, that it drove a woman to the brink of insanity, and a man to risk everything to pull her back. It started the moment she took her first breath. In a small Indonesian village, a woman named Yani was in agonizing labor. The room was thick with heat and fear. When the baby finally emerged, the midwives fell silent. The child wasn't crying. Her eyes were open. They weren't the eyes of a newborn. They were a terrifying, piercing red. Nobody wanted to say it, but they all felt it. Something had been waiting for her. The baby was named Mariyam. As she grew, the invisible presence grew with her. It wasn't a monster under the bed. It was a friend, a companion only she could see. To the outside world, Mariyam was the strange girl in the corner, whispering to empty air, laughing at jokes nobody told. The terror didn't truly surface until she went to school. During a quiet afternoon class, Mariyam sat hunched over her notebook. The other students whispered, mocking her, calling her the devil's friend. Suddenly, the chalk scratching on the blackboard stopped. Mariyam's pen began to move on its own. A voice, guttural and ancient, whispered in her ear, drowning out the teacher. The temperature in the room plummeted. Then the whispers stopped. Mariyam looked up. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "My friend is not the devil," she whispered. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the classroom. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The students froze. Then chaos erupted. It started with a girl in the back row. Her hand, seemingly possessed by a force beyond her control, gripped a pen and jammed it toward her own eye. She screamed, but the hand didn't stop. Another boy began slamming his head against his metal desk. Thud, thud, thud. His eyes rolled back into his skull. The teacher tried to intervene, but he was thrown backward by an invisible force. Mariyam stood in the center of the storm, watching. The entity wasn't just protecting her, it was punishing them. It was a massacre of self-destruction, orchestrated by an invisible conductor. It took the arrival of a religious teacher, Saleh, and his desperate prayers to break the trance. The children collapsed, exhausted and bleeding. Mariyam was expelled. The villagers shunned her. She was a walking plague. Desperate, her mother took her to an Islamic boarding school, seeking help from Saleh. He was a man of immense faith, but even he sensed a darkness in Mariyam that was deeper than he had ever encountered. He began the ruqya, an exorcism. Mariyam was bound to a chair as Saleh recited verses, the room thick with the scent of burning incense. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Mariyam smiled. It wasn't her smile. It was twisted, ancient, and mocking. "Who are you?" Saleh demanded, his voice trembling slightly. Mariyam's voice deepened, becoming a grinding baritone. "I have been with her since her first breath. She belongs to me." Saleh grabbed a glass of holy water and splashed it on her face. Steam hissed from her skin. Mariyam convulsed, her body thrashing against the restraints. The voice roared, shaking the windows. I am from the lineage of If. I existed before Adam. Saleh's blood ran cold. If, an Ifrit, one of the most powerful rebellious classes of Jinn, creatures of smokeless fire, beings of immense strength and arrogance. They didn't just haunt, they owned. Why are you attached to her? Saleh shouted. Because I love her, the Ifrit growled, and anyone who touches her will burn. Saleh continued the prayers for hours. The Ifrit thrashed, hurling furniture across the room, causing Saleh's assistants to vomit blood. Finally, mercifully, Mariyam collapsed, unconscious. The Ifrit had retreated, but Saleh knew the truth. It wasn't gone. It was merely dormant. He pulled Yani aside, his face grave. This entity is powerful. It has bonded with her blood. You must keep her away from men. If she marries, the Ifrit will kill the husband. Years passed. Mariyam grew into a beautiful young woman, but her life was a cage. She worked in a factory, keeping her head down, ignoring the stares. She wore a special locket given to her by Saleh, a talisman of protection. But protection has limits. Enter Bagas. Bagas was a kind, hard-working man who saw past the rumors. He saw Mariyam, not the curse. He walked her home, shielded her from the cruel whispers of co-workers, and slowly, despite her fear, Mariyam fell in love. One evening, Bagas and Mariyam were walking near the coastline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in blood-red hues. Bagas stopped her. He took her hand. "Mariyam," he said softly, "I don't care about the stories. I want to marry you." Mariam's heart soared, but a second later, it plummeted into ice. She pulled her hand away. "No, Bagas, you don't understand. It will kill you." "I'm not afraid," he insisted. "You should be." That night, Bagas walked home alone. He felt a heaviness in the air, a prickling on the back of his neck. He turned down a dark alley. The streetlights flickered and died. He stopped. In the darkness ahead, a figure stood. It was Mariyam, but something was wrong. She was wearing a different dress. Her posture was rigid, and her eyes, they glowed like embers in the dark. "Mariyam," he whispered. The figure stepped forward. It moved with unnatural, jerking motions. Then it spoke, but the voice wasn't Mariyam's. It was a thunderous, distorted roar. "She is mine." The figure lunged. It wasn't a punch, it was a telekinetic blast. Bagas was thrown backward, hitting a concrete wall with a sickening crack. He slumped to the ground, dazed. The entity crouched over him. In the real world, miles away, Mariyam woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, knowing something terrible had happened. The next morning, the village woke to a horror show. Bagas was found in the middle of the street. He was alive, but his mind was gone. He was mutilating himself, his hands tearing at his own face, his mouth frothing with blood. He looked up at his mother, his eyes void of recognition, and spoke in a voice that belonged to the grave. He touched her. He collapsed, dead. Mariyam didn't go to the funeral. She couldn't. She sat by the sea, the wind whipping her hair, staring into the horizon. She felt the Ifrit behind her, a cold presence in the noon sun. "You did this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The voice echoed in her mind. "I warned you. I will not share you." That night, Mariyam tried to end it. She stood on the rocks, ready to throw herself into the churning ocean. If she died, the curse died with her. But before she could jump, a hand grabbed her arm. It wasn't the Ifrit. It was Farhan. Farhan was a former student of Saleh. He had grown up watching Mariyam from afar. He was a man of quiet strength, unshakable faith, and deep sorrow. He had seen what the jinn did to his mentor, Saleh, who had eventually died from the spiritual toll of the exorcisms. "Don't," Farhan said, his voice firm. "He killed him," Mariyam sobbed. "Everyone I love dies." "Then we fight," Farhan replied. Saleh left instructions. "We don't give up." Farhan took Mariyam home, but the Ifrit was furious. It wasn't just jealous anymore, it was threatened. That night, the house became a war zone. Doors slammed shut, locking on their own. Plates flew off shelves, shattering against walls. Mariyam sat on her bed, clutching a piece of paper with prayers written on it. The lights cut out. In the pitch black, she heard it. The heavy breathing, the scrape of claws on the wooden floor. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was in the room. Suddenly, the door burst open. A blinding light flooded the corridor. It was Farhan, holding a lantern and reciting verses loudly. "Mariyam, read," he shouted, throwing her a book. The entity shrieked. It manifested as a dark, hulking shadow in the corner of the room, taller than the ceiling, its shape flickering like smoke. It lunged at Farhan. Farhan didn't flinch. He stood his ground, reciting the verses with a conviction that stunned the entity. The shadow recoiled, dissolving into the darkness. The house fell silent. For the first time in her life, Mariyam felt the presence retreating. Not just hiding, but retreating. Days turned into weeks. Farhan stayed by her side. He visited Saleh's grave, seeking blessings. He helped her perform her prayers. He treated her with a respect and tenderness that broke through her walls. But the Ifrit was watching. It had been watching for centuries. It knew human weaknesses. It knew how to exploit fear. One evening, Mariyam was at home with her mother. Farhan had left, promising to return for dinner. As soon as his motorcycle roared away, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The walls began to bleed. Not blood, but black ichor, sticky and smelling of sulfur. Words began to write themselves on the ceiling in jagged charcoal strokes. "He will die." Mariyam fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Stop it! Leave him alone." Suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway. It looked exactly like Farhan. It wore his clothes. It had his face. But when it smiled, the smile stretched too wide, tearing the skin. "Hello, Mariyam," the false Farhan said. "Did you miss me?" Mariyam scrambled backward. "You're not him. I could be him," the entity taunted, walking closer, its movements glitching, phasing in and out of reality. "I can take his form. I can be whatever you want. Just accept me." "No." The entity's face morphed into something horrific. Scales, fangs, eyes like burning coals. "Then I will take you in death." Suddenly, the real Farhan burst through the front door. He saw the doppelganger standing over Mariyam. The doppelganger turned, hissing. "Two of you?" the Ifrit sneered. "One for the grave, one for the fire." Farhan didn't hesitate. He pulled out a small bottle of water he had recited prayers over and splashed it across the doppelganger's face. The entity screamed, a sound that shattered the windows. It dissolved into a cloud of black smoke that swirled around the room before vanishing into the floorboards. Mariyam was shaking violently. "It won't stop, Farhan. It will never stop." Farhan knelt beside her, taking her hands. "There is one thing it cannot withstand, a bond sealed by God." Mariyam looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "Marry me," Farhan said. "Tonight. The Ifrit claims you are his. We need to claim you for the human world under the protection of Allah. A lawful marriage creates a barrier that a jinn cannot cross without severe punishment. It was a desperate plan, a defiance of the supernatural. News spread quickly. Mariyam and Farhan were to be wed. The villagers were terrified, but the religious leaders agreed. It was a spiritual battle they had to fight. The ceremony was set for midnight in the local mosque. It was a night of high tension. The air was thick with static electricity. Every shadow seemed to move. Mariyam sat in the ablution room, performing her ritual wash. She was alone. The water tap suddenly turned off. The silence was deafening. She looked into the mirror. Her reflection wasn't moving. "He cannot save you," the reflection whispered. Mariyam spun around. The room was empty. She ran for the door. It was locked. She pounded on it, screaming for help. The lights flickered. Suddenly, she wasn't in the mosque anymore. The walls dissolved. The floor turned into hot black sand. The air was filled with the smell of burning flesh and sulfur. She was in the jinn's realm. A vast, desolate landscape stretched before her. In the distance, she saw towering, misshapen figures dancing around fires. The sky was a bruised purple, swirling with storms. She was dragged forward by invisible hands. She was brought before a massive throne of obsidian. Sitting upon it was the Ifrit in his true form. He was colossal, a giant of shadow and flame. His wings spanned the horizon. This was the entity that had stalked her, a king of the unseen. "You thought you could escape?" the Ifrit boomed, his voice shaking the very ground. "You thought a human child could bind you to him?" Mariyam stood trembling before the giant. "Let me go. I have loved you since you were born," the Ifrit said, his voice dripping with a possessive, terrifying affection. "I have killed for you. I have protected you. I am the only one who truly knows you. Stay with me. Rule this world with me." Mariyam looked up at the monster. She thought of her mother. She thought of Saleh. She thought of Bagas. And she thought of Farhan. "Your love is a cage," she said, her voice gaining strength. "And I choose the human world. I choose Farhan." The Ifrit roared in rage. He raised a hand to strike her down. Back in the mosque, panic was ensuing. Farhan stood at the altar. The imam was ready, but Mariyam was gone. "She's vanished," Yani screamed. "The Ifrit has taken her," someone cried. Farhan's eyes scanned the room. He saw the fear in everyone's eyes. He saw the doubt, but he remembered Saleh's words. "Faith is the weapon." "Begin the ceremony," Farhan ordered. "But she isn't here," the imam protested. "Begin it," Farhan shouted. "I am accepting her as my wife. My intention is true. The contract is in my heart. Start the prayer." The imam, shaken but moved by Farhan's conviction, began the nikah ceremony. Farhan closed his eyes. He recited the acceptance. "I accept this marriage." In the jinn realm, Mariyam heard the words. They echoed like thunder across the dark landscape. A golden chain of light appeared around her wrist. Farhan recited the second acceptance. "I accept this marriage." The chain tightened. The Ifrit recoiled, covering his eyes. The light was blinding him. It was the light of a sacred bond, a covenant he could not break. Farhan took a breath. He knew this was the moment. The Ifrit would fight back with everything he had. Farhan recited the third and final acceptance. "I accept this marriage." In the realm of the jinn, a massive shockwave exploded from Mariyam. The lights surrounded her, burning the Ifrit's grasp. The giant screamed in agony as the divine protection of the marriage contract forced him back. Mariyam ran. She didn't know where, but the light guided her. She ran towards the sound of Farhan's voice, a distant echo in the void. Back in the mosque, the wind howled. The doors slammed open. Everyone fell to their knees, covering their faces as a storm of dust and debris swirled around them. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Mariyam stood in the doorway of the mosque. She was disheveled, covered in sand, and bruised, but she was there. She looked at Farhan. The connection was undeniable. He ran to her, catching her just as her legs gave out. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing with relief. The Ifrit was gone. The bond of marriage had created a barrier he could not cross. They lived a quiet life after that. The haunting seemed to cease. The villagers slowly accepted them. Mariyam and Farhan built a home filled with prayer and love. But the story doesn't end with happily ever after. One evening, months later, Mariyam was in the kitchen. Farhan was praying in the other room. She hummed a tune, feeling safe for the first time in years. She walked past a mirror. She stopped. For a split second, she saw him. The Ifrit. He was standing right behind her in the reflection. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't roaring. He was just watching. His face was calm. His eyes locked on hers. A silent reminder. Marriage protects your body, the gaze seemed to say, but I am patient. I am eternal. And eventually, the bond will break. Mariyam turned around. The room was empty. The shadow was gone. She looked back at the mirror. A single sentence was etched into the steam on the glass. I will wait for you until death. Mariyam wiped the mirror clean, her hand trembling. She knew then the horrifying truth. She had won her life. She had won her husband. But she would never, ever truly be alone. The Ifrit didn't leave. He just learned to wait.